One of our most successful ads of all time was 10 minutes long. It was a great objection handling ad that was always running in the background, had never fatigued. There's no set time limit. You need to entertain them first, grab their attention, and then educate them for them to be able to make the decision whether or not this is something they want to click on. Sometimes that can take a little bit of time. You can be really concise. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit more time, and it's going to be a little bit more drawn out.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Joel Irway here, and welcome to another very special episode of Experts Unleashed. Super pumped as we continue our advertising series for you here today. I've got a good friend over here, Mike Heiser, who is an absolute boss. He spent well over $100 million in ads, attributed well over $500 million in revenue, and we are going to talk all things advertising. Super excited to dive into our conversation here today. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by GetInspired.app, which is your AI-driven marketing butler. Inspired is your personal marketing butler, bringing you new, ready-to-use content for your brand every single day based on proven viral ideas. Stop wasting hours trying to be creative on demand and transform your marketing without the time investment. Get a 14-day free trial at GetInspired.app. Mike, welcome, my dude. Happy to have you on.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. I've got to amp up my energy and my voice a little bit. I feel like I'm, amateur hour over here a little bit.
You're doing just fine, just fine. All right. So, Mike, give our audience just a quick 30 to 60-second background about your credentials. Obviously, $100 million in ad spend, $500 million in revenue. What else should we know about you in terms of your background and your credentials?
Yeah, goodness. I've worked for so many different incredible people over the years. Todd Herman, Amy Porterfield. I worked with Nick Kusmich. Probably biggest claim to fame would be working at Traffic and Funnels and Sales Mentor for quite a while as we were ramping those businesses up. Most recently, I've worked with a company called Pampa Program, which we took from $10 million a year to $100 million a year, all on the back of performance marketing. That's the common thread that ties all of these different businesses together, is always performance marketing, where it's building the machine that's $1 in, $10 out, or $1 in, $5 out, and should be pretty valuable for your audience, Joel, as they're trying to get to that next level.
Awesome. Well, let me get a little bit more context. So in terms of advertising, do you primarily focus on one platform? Are you multi-channel, omnipresent? Like, where is your superpower?
Yeah, so typically platform agnostic. So we've done, native, Snapchat, TikTok, but the two platforms that are really scalable platforms are YouTube and Meta. Meta meaning Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
So Meta, in my opinion, is the most forgiving. It makes the most sense to start on Meta because once you transition over to YouTube, you need to worry about things like really high production quality. Typically, it's more akin to like a television commercial than it is a typical advertisement. And on Meta, it's become so easy these days because you can download the teleprompter app on your phone, switch to shooting in 4K on your phone, and just shoot selfie style on your phone to shoot all of the different ad creators you could want. So the ad production on Meta is substantially easier, and it always starts on Meta and then expands out to multi-channel.
Awesome. So let's now talk about that, getting past $5,000 a month in ad spend. The context here that we're taking with this series is, from $0 to $5,000 a month in ad spend, you're kind of in offer validation. You really want to figure out if your message and market match, if you've got an offer that is something that people actually want, and you're probably spending $100 a day, maybe a little bit more to figure that out and get an ROI positive. So assuming for our conversation, we have gotten past offer validation, and now we're at $5,000 a month in ad spend. What are some of the things that you implement, or what's a framework that you follow to go from to double from $5,000 a month to $10,000 a month, or $10,000 a month to 20, 30, 40, 50? Let's kind of talk through that.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first thing is, the first metric that we're trying to achieve is ultimately having 100 front-end customers. Once you have that, then you can take that customer list, upload it into Facebook, and create a lookalike audience, which is going to be the secret power to future ad success. Until you have that, essentially what we're going to want to do is test the different interests in order to find out what sort of things the market's paying attention to. And then once you've found one interest, just create multiple different ads that appeal to people in that interest stack. It's best to test with a broad audience and just consistently test ad creatives. And the best format that I've come up with is, in terms of the video ad, is hook, story, education, and call to action. Those are the four critical elements. And the hook and the personal story that relates to it are going to change in your different ads. You can use things like topical ideas, like if there's something in the news that you can leverage as a hook, that's going to perform for a little while at the very least. And then just other curiosity driven hooks to grab people's attention, kind of flipping that conventional wisdom on its head. That's going to grab the right people's attention. But very rarely is it something like just calling out your audience. I see that very frequently. So from that $5,000, getting to $10,000, it's all just testing creatives, and until you've gotten the first 100 conversions, so you can go create that lookalike audience. Then you're going to transition to using that lookalike audience and continuing to test new creative over time.
Okay, cool. I want to break it down just a little bit. So you talk about using video ads and I think really story-based creative. That was, I interpreted that from what you were talking about. So my first question is, do you find video ads, let's just stick to one platform right now with Meta, that's what primarily my audience is mostly using in testing. Do you find video ads, when you get it to hit, gives you the most longevity of scalability, or do you also test image ads? What do you see there?
Great question. I think a lot of people think about Facebook in particular as just the news feed. So they get kind of in this creative mindset of I'm going to, create for the news feed. But the reality is Meta as a platform has so many different placements and so much inventory that most people are not even taking advantage of. So the answer to that is one, video creative every single time wins. And it's building your brand further and getting your message a little bit wider in a way that ad copy by itself is not going to alone. Tested video creative versus static image creative countless times. Video always wins. And again, I think it's just related to the inventory and the brand impact of those ad creatives over
time. Can I jump in real quick? When you say it always wins, are you talking in terms of long-term scalability or cost per acquisition being the lowest, or maybe both?
Both. Yeah,
really.
So both in terms of CPA, regardless of what we're optimizing for, it could be leads, call scheduled, application submitted, front-end product purchases, back-end product purchases, across the board, video creative consistently wins. The only exception to that is static creative can perform as kind of a middle of funnel, bottom of funnel retargeting asset. People that are really familiar with your brand. That's a very limited audience size. So it's going to have a little bit more longevity in that space as compared to trying to run it to just the cold market. But if you're running into the cold market, what you're going to find is it fatigues very, very fast. There's a lot of people that can then rip off your static creative and just does not have much staying power in the market. And unless you really know what you're looking for, ad fatigue can be pretty difficult to spot.
It's funny you say that, because what I like to do in the early stages is only static creative. And we really target bottom of funnel. Like, even if it's going to a cold audience, it's one of the greatest things about Facebook is it will know who will buy this. Like, if the offer is compelling and you're very clear on what it is, here's what I've got, here's what it's going to do for you. We do test very bottom of funnel. Like, our image will be just a product shot of the image, and it's like a mini sales page. That is great for us to validate that target market. But we do find that it burns out I don't want to say quite quickly, but it's limited in its scalability. So we will only be able to hit a few $100s a day at most. I think the most we've ever been able to profitably do with even a broad offer, it's around $500 a day in ad spend. Right. Until before that burns out, it's okay, we're really only going after the hottest of the hot, and you just don't have that large of a pool. Do you have a proven framework for video ads? What's a typical length you like to do for Meta and for these ads?
Another great question. So it's that hook, story, education, call to action is primarily going to be your top of funnel cold market ads. And then using Alan Sultanic's framework, if you're familiar with him, he had this great Facebook post a little while ago called something to the effect of how to get infomercial level quality testimonial using a simple process, something like that. So you can basically follow his framework and get those testimonial videos, get those people that are filming those testimonials to sign a release, and then use those testimonials and your ads to serve as middle and bottom of funnel. Because ultimately, people want to hear what you say. They probably want to buy your product, but more times than not, they just don't trust you. So having that combination, once you get to that stage in a scale campaign of the top of funnel, kind of guru ads, so to speak, and then the middle and bottom of funnel UGC style testimonial ads is the winning combination that you're going to be able to scale immensely high.
How long are you seeing these campaigns last for before, let's say we're at $10,000 a month, right? And now like we're consistently being able to convert and we're profitable at like $10,000 a month. I know this is a very broad question and every market is going to be different, but just from your experience, right? How long do those video ads targeting cold traffic, like how long can they last for before you have to start to refresh creative, refresh angles?
Yeah.
Do you find that they have longer longevity or
compared to static creative, for sure, they have infinitely longer lifespans. And like you alluded to, it depends on the market. So in Pompo, where we were spending $2.5 million a month, once we identified a winning ad, we could run that same ad for a year or more.
Wow.
Because the market size is 40 million women in the US, essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas something like traffic and funnels, where the addressable market was somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million people, obviously that's a dramatically smaller market. So, we would see a winning ad that we could run for 3 months or so, roughly, before it started to fatigue and we needed to get some new winners in there.
And do you find the selfie style, I know with selfie style, it's going to be a different format, like sizing. Do you find that has a effect on longevity because it can get you different placements?
This is going to be the most tactical answer ever.
Yeah.
So yes, it would. And there's actually a way around that. So when you're testing these ad creatives, there's actually an option in Business Manager to go and edit the creatives for different placements. So your goal is to have the exact same creative, but you want to have the different aspect ratios. So whenever we're testing, regardless of, who the business is, we'll always produce 9:16, which is the native kind of selfie format. But then we'll also squish it down and produce a 4:5 version. So it gives you a little more vertical space in the newsfeed placements. And we'll produce both and run them in the same ad as the same creative test.
So you'll let Facebook kind of figure out what placement to put it in, even though it's got all of the options and it can open that up. So that's fantastic. Typical length you like to use for these, like, these style of videos, are they 30 seconds?
I love this question because there's so many people out there that are like, oh, we need to get our ads shorter. We need to get our ads shorter. Flipping that bit of conventional wisdom on its head, one of our most successful ads all time was 10 minutes long. It was a great objection handling ad that we produced. And it was essentially always running in the background, had never fatigued at that point. But there's no set time limit because ultimately it's, you need to entertain them first and grab their attention. And then you need to educate them in order for them to be able to make the decision whether or not this is something they even want to click on. And in doing so, sometimes that can take a little bit of time. You can be really concise. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit more time and it's going to be a little bit more drawn out, but there's no lower or upper limit to that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. So with Meta, there are so many now automatic features that you can do with your, with your ads. How do you set up your campaign structure as you are trying to scale past $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a month? Do you keep it simple? Are you breaking out a lot of things? Like you're breaking out by audience? Are you breaking out by like Instagram versus Meta platforms? Are you breaking out, like how granular do you get in the testing, in the breaking out versus maybe just throwing it all into a CBO and saying, Facebook, you do it, like,
It's kind of a combination of both. So especially for people that are spending a lower budget per month on Facebook ads, you want to take as much control over that as you can. But you also want to let Facebook do the heavy lifting where Facebook is really good at what it does. So depending on how much we're spending, the best plan is to test in what's called an ABO campaign, which is ad set budget optimization, where you set the budget for each individual ad set. And you're trying to optimize for the lowest point in the funnel where you're going to achieve 50 conversions per week. So that's the rule that we're always following. And obviously that changes depending on what your budget is, because if you have a $100 CPA and you need 50 conversions per ad per week, that adds up very, very quickly. So if you're optimizing for leads or call bookings, whatever that actually looks like, depending on your budget, the lowest point that you can afford to optimize for. And then in the creative testing campaigns, and this was actually validated by a team of Facebook reps as the best way to test creative for the majority of businesses in our space, we'll run starting with a 1% lookalike audience with one creative per ad set, and then 1% lookalike audience, different ad creative and a different ad set, and continue essentially identifying the winners based on whatever it is that campaign is optimizing for.
And this is ABO, correct? Ad set optimization in your testing. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
And essentially what we're trying to do is identify 3 to 6 winning ads that have had 50 conversions at the target KPI that we want to achieve. And then we will take those ads and duplicate them over into a scale campaign. And I actually have a prospecting framework from Facebook that I can share with you. I'm not sure how we can reference that on maybe like QR code or something like that. And essentially, this is a scale campaign set up the correct way that Facebook wants to see. And the key distinction here is there's a lot of exclusions that are required that most people miss. And because all of this is so oriented around machine learning these days, we want to take the variable of, is this a winning ad, out of Facebook's decision-making process. So when we duplicate those ads from creative testing that have already validated, Facebook copies that learning over into your scale campaign. And you already have that initial indication that, yes, this is a winning ad. We're safe to spend money on this. And it's one less thing that Facebook has to do.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Are we now into the scale campaign with this prospecting framework? Or are we still in testing?
Still in testing. I think at $5,000 a month, most people are not even going to get to the level that would be needed to implement a scale campaign, until they're spending $25,000 to $50,000 a month, roughly, just because the conversions aren't there. There's not enough data for the machine learning. So the very simplified ad set budget optimization and creative testing methodology is going to be all that they're going to need to really get to that next level of, $10,000 a month and spend. Profitable spend.
Okay, cool. So we're still in the ad set budget optimization method. And so breaking out everything, single ad set to single ad, that's like one ad set per ad. That's my favorite framework. It's like the sniper campaign. It's like, this is how you get super, super granular, but also very controlled. So that makes total sense. Now, what are the exclusions that you're talking about? I know audience size, audience targeting, you really want to get lookalike, right? So I've heard some conflicting things about lookalike is garbage versus some people still love lookalike, right? Obviously, I think you're in the latter, meaning you obviously feel that lookalike is still very, very valuable.
And I'd be curious for anyone who's hasn't had success with them, what their accounts look like that those haven't worked, because I've never had that experience. But yeah, essentially what we're going to want to do is test the different creatives to those lookalike audiences, and that's going to be the best methodology. And then before we even consider scaling up to scale campaign, where we're talking about those exclusions and things, we're just going to expand that lookalike audience in our creative testing first. So we're going to go from, maybe just a 1% lookalike audience to a 4% lookalike audience. And then from a 4%, then we're going to go to a 7%, then from a 7%, then we're going to go to 10%. And we're going to continue expanding that audience size in the creative testing before we move anything to a scale campaign, just because these are variables that we can control. And then we really have it validated that we have a winning cold market ad that we can truly scale with. In terms of the exclusions in the creative testing, really the only exclusion that's worth mentioning is existing customers. Let's not target the existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
I know certain people, it's not that big of a deal if you do or don't, but if you have a huge customer list and you're constantly just showing the same people your ads without defining to Facebook, hey, you need to go find new buckets of people, then that can hinder performance. And the logic there that I've heard in the past is your existing customers will jump onto your ads and say like, oh yeah, this is a great product, things of that nature. People will do that anyways.
Let me ask you another question. So as we are really starting to scale into cold in larger budgets and we're testing front-end messaging, are you also doing a combination of landing page testing at the same time? Because that's where it can get really kind of confusing of what to focus on and what's clean data, what's not clean data. Because if I'm testing 5 different messages coming in, it's very hard for me to optimize the landing page because they're all coming in with different prefaces. Right. How do you look at that as part of your process?
I think depending on what it is that's being tested, testing on Meta in particular is very, very difficult these days because Facebook's machine learning is as good as it is. So if you're going to test, typically what you'll need to do is, rather than setting it up as an experiment in VWO or something like that, what you're going to want to test instead is setting it up as an experiment on the Facebook side and let Facebook split the traffic. This eliminates any overlap or skew that exists in the audience. And Facebook is able to manage that far more effectively than we're able to.
Oh, I didn't even realize you can set up so you can have Facebook send it to 2 different landing pages.
So you set up, they're called experiments on Facebook, and you define them at either the campaign level or the ad set level.
Oh, get out of here.
And it works so much better than trying to experiment with VWO or something where you're going to get like the page flash at the very beginning.
That alone is going to save me so much aggravation. And
Yeah, trying to track those conversions through VW.
yeah, I mean, or even like, a split testing software, like just like built in like go high level where you have like the top where it will automatically rotate or whatever, or split the traffic, but it's very, very difficult to track it back to the proper ad level. So it's called an experiment. I've seen it. I've just always ignored that stuff because what I thought it was I thought it was just going to automatically split test headlines, but going to the same URL, which that would make it very difficult for me to manage, like for me to figure out what's good data, what's bad data from the conversion side. But if it can, okay.
Yeah,
well,
and
great.
typically when we're running one of those, we still like to have proven creatives on that side. So, then we're really isolating the variable to the landing page, for these different messages or different avatars that we're kind of going after.
Got it.
And,
So you still want to have the proven creative that has been converting, and then you want to optimize downstream after that. So you're keeping the traffic the same, the traffic, the creative variable, the messaging variable the same, and then you're optimizing downstream, and that makes sense. Where I get stuck is, like early on offer validation. Typically, what we'll do is we will do, very, very bottom of funnel, like just make sure the offer is resonating. Like, hey, this is what I want. Here's what I've got. Here's what you're going to get, etc. And then we try and scale. Usually conversion rates go down, which is fine. But then it becomes a balancing act. Well, what do we test next? Like, do we test different messaging and hooks and ads? Or now do we go back and redo the landing page to try and make it more cold traffic friendly? Do you have any insights on that?
Actually, I do. It's obviously at a dramatically different scale, but I have a client that I'm working with right now that's spending about $3 million a month, split between YouTube and Facebook. And one of the things that they do is they want to test different hooks. So every single ad creative that we have that comes in, we have 10 different hooks for one essentially idea that we're testing. And that level of complexity is, one, very time consuming, but then two, it's not going to move the needle nearly as much as just going and refilming proven creative in a different location. It's a great way to refresh creative that's potentially fatiguing, or just testing a totally new concept of an ad. Both of those options are going to work so much better than testing, different hooks or different pieces of ad copy, things of that nature. Just really low leverage tests.
Cool.
I think Facebook has done eye tracking studies. Like the number one thing people look at is the ad creative. And to kind of bolster this point a little bit, everyone thinks of, again, the newsfeed, but the number one placement for the majority of people's campaigns are Facebook and Instagram Reels right now. Yep. They're really pushing that placement to compete with TikTok.
Yep. Reels are insane. Are insane. I want to backtrack just a little bit. So you're a heavy advocate for video ads. So with your video ads, obviously you still do need some copy creative in the body text or the captions or wherever it pops up, right?
Yep.
How are you structuring that copy? Are you, like, let's say you're going to a low ticket offer, right? So it's direct to sale. Are you relying on that copy to be more curiosity driven, of like, you want to force them to watch the video? Or do you rely on, hey, I want quality traffic coming in, so, it's kind of clear I've got something to sell you? Does that make sense? Like, what's the intent with the copy in combination with the creative?
With the video creative, typically it's essentially the same framework for both the video script and the copy. And the only time that it really varies is depending on market or potential compliance concerns, because Facebook can scan ad copy essentially instantly for any compliance issues. And a lot of people get hung up with compliance issues. Facebook has a much harder time scanning video for compliance issues, and they're not as nitpicky about it. Obviously, follow best practices. Don't say you're going to cure cancer or do anything stupid. Don't say they're going to make $1 million from watching or buying this training or anything like that. But it's a little bit more forgiving and in the video format. So what we've found to work is actually short form ad copy with variable length video, where it can be, 2 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, and anything in between. Typically, the sweet spot for an ad that really converts well is 3 to 5 minutes, more times than not. And if we're talking about static creative, then yeah, the ad copy has to do the heavy lifting at that point, but it really opens the door to all of those compliance issues that we were talking about.
Got it. Okay. So then what you're saying is shorter copy that I would say is more curiosity driven. So they focus on the video. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, maybe like opening with the hook, having some sort of, hook that leads them to go watch the video, and then the video does all of the heavy lifting. So you put a lot more focus, if I'm understanding correctly, on the video itself than you do
Right.
on the body copy of the ad.
It hasn't always been that way for certain clients. Like one is a company called The Land Geek is one of our clients, and they have a hard time doing video creative for the most part. So our hand is kind of forced into, leveraging a lot of different static creatives. And there we have, basically a set static creative, which is essentially following the same framework: hook, story, education, call to action. And then we're just rotating out different ad creatives in order to find better winners over time, knowing that it's the creative that grabs people's attention. And there's a lot of different ways to structure ad creative. Obviously having that contrast or depth or juxtaposition, between two different elements, before and after kind of ad creatives, work really well. And then just kind of like out of the box ideas too that are also congruent. Like one of the ones that we have almost looks like, the guy's name is Mark, and it looks almost like Mark is holding a piece of land, similar to how you would hold like a pizza box or something like that. And it looks like he's coming to deliver a piece of land, and that has absolutely crushed. But it's totally AI driven in that regard. So just being creative with the ideas typically works really well.
With your clients that have, like, do you typically run a combination of creatives like static and video? And if so, will you break them out into their own individual campaigns so they don't compete with each other, or are you lumping them into the same campaigns?
So it'll always be in the same campaign. So if you ever go look at any of our accounts, they all look insanely clean because there's only two campaigns typically, which is a scale campaign and a creative testing campaign. There's other advanced things that we can do that is probably not going to be like bid caps and cost caps and all of that for day parting and all of the kind of advanced media buying things. But those don't exist in the majority of our accounts because we're not nearly to that scale where they would be effective. So then in the creative testing campaign, all of the static images and all of the video creators are all going to be in their own individual ad sets. And then similarly with copy as well, copy would get its own individual ad set as well.
Got it. And this is true for the testing and the scale campaigns?
And no, so the only thing that goes into the scale campaigns are proven winners. So typically that's going to be, one copy creative combination, and then that gets copied over into the scale campaign, minimum of 3. So we need 3 of those combinations. And typically it's going to be different creative copy combinations. You're not going to find like, oh, this one piece of creative is won 4 times over, for example.
Well, let's talk about quickly then how you structure your scale campaigns. So You said your accounts are very, very clean. You've got your testing campaign, which is ABO, and then your scale campaigns. Is that CBO or is that ABO?
Yep. Scale campaigns are always CBO or
CBO.
Whatever Facebook's calling it these days, advantage budget, something or other.
It drives me nuts, man.
Yeah,
it's like
me too.
I'll teach, basic account setup is like, oh yeah, campaign budget optimization, and then that's gone. It's like,
they just change it.
They just change it to whatever AI language now with the AI star or whatever. So if I were to look inside a CBO scale campaign, what does your ad set look like? Do you have multiple ad sets for your creatives, or are you just taking all of your winners and having one campaign, one ad set, and then putting all your winners in ads?
Great question. So this was actually something that came directly from Meta reps. So Facebook, and you can try Googling this term and see if you can find the PDF that comes from Facebook. But Facebook has this framework called the prospecting campaign framework, which is what's used for scale campaigns. And where the break from from the creative testing where it's one ad per ad set is your ad sets are now controlling your audiences with the exclusions included in there. So your first ad set is going to be very, very broad interest stack. So multiple interests stacked together. So you get an audience size of like 50 or 100 million people. So very, very big audiences, or open targeting. And we're going to exclude the audiences from the second, third, and fourth ad set that I'm about to mention, as well as any existing customers or existing people that for whatever event you're optimizing for. So, if you're optimizing for leads, exclude the leads is basically the format. Then within that first ad set, you're going to have winning ad number 1, winning ad number 2, winning ad number 3, all the way up to winning ad number 6. You can try to add more than 6 ads. It's a math problem, a linear regression. So, or logarithmic regression. I can't remember. One of those two. It's an advanced math problem where Facebook will literally not spend on any ad that you put in there above 6 ads. So then for the second ad set, this is going to be a pixel-based purchase lookalike audience, or again, whatever it is that you're optimizing for. So pixel-based schedules, leads, whatever. And typically at this stage, it's going to be a 10% lookalike. And now you're going to exclude the audiences from the third and fourth ad set that I'm about to mention, but it's the same 3 to 6 ads from ad set 1 that gets copied over into all of these. From there, it's a CRM-based purchase lookalike audience, which again, 10%. And there's a trend here. Now we're just excluding the audience from ad set number 4. And then finally, we have a video views and engagement lookalike audience. So anyone who's viewing your videos on Facebook, basically, we're going to create a 10% lookalike of that. And that final ad set is just going to be excluding the existing customers. So basically, you're eliminating any overlap that could potentially exist with the audience in each of these ad sets. And then Facebook is able to distribute that spend to the specific ads that are performing well to those specific segments of customers.
Interesting. How do you handle campaigns that have a global audience? Does that matter? Or like, do you isolate based on country?
I love geofencing our campaigns. The marketing collateral and marketing message that's typically going to resonate with people in the US, Canada, maybe Western Europe, places like that is going to be dramatically different than what's going to resonate with people in the variety of other countries. And Facebook machine learning can be, in certain ways very stupid, where it's hyper logical and it makes sense, but Facebook's going to try to deliver the results that you're asking for. So, for people that are trying to run like wide open targeting to the whole world, you'll notice that Facebook is optimizing towards like these kind of random third world countries where it's getting great cost per conversions. But especially if you're running an ascension model in your business and you're trying to sell a high ticket backend, those leads just absolutely suck. And it's because Facebook's putting up great results from people in those countries, at the CPA that you've told it is acceptable. So of course the positive feedback loop there is we're going to keep delivering your ads to people in those countries. And the riskiest part with that is people end up poisoning their pixel, especially at scale. And you basically have to restart from square one in order to reset the machine learning and get the account back up and running where it should be.
If you're doing that, going to multiple countries, are you creating separate campaigns per the country, like same structure, but just, hey, a US scale campaign, a Canada scale campaign, a UK scale campaign?
But we'll take it one step further. So we'll geofence by country, and we'll have geofence creative testing campaigns. So, creative testing for Canada and creative testing for the US, and then scale campaign for Canada, scale campaign for the US, et cetera, et cetera. So always geofenced in those 2 campaign types.
I'm sure AI can do this because I haven't run any personal campaigns that have scaled to super large numbers across multiple countries, but I do know it's very obvious, it's very clear once you look at the data and just customer responses that come in and support requests that come in, like, Australians have different questions than Canadians have different questions
100%.
than anywhere else in the country. And so I bet you AI could very much take like your winning, like say you've got a winning creative and copy campaign in the United States. Say, hey, I want to model this for, what people in the UK would resonate with, or Italy or Australia or whatever, India. Maybe you've done that, but that's just
typically what we found is there's a lot of scale. I think people have a really hard time actually understanding, how many people is 300 million people in the US. And also the US is like by far the biggest market in the world. So traditionally, in the case of Pampa, where we were spending $2.5 million a month on ads, that was all in the US. That wasn't global whatsoever.
It's insane.
And especially in the case of, trying to ascend buyers into a high ticket funnel, now you have time zone considerations, you have language barriers, you have all of these other considerations. And especially in health, there's different laws that you have to honor for these other countries that you're operating in. So it's very difficult to scale globally, just by changing the targeting on your ads. And that exists for compliance as well. So there's different versions of the FTC in different countries with different regulatory laws that you need to follow. Otherwise, you could get sued in India, for example. And, good luck litigating that. I digress. So I think your original question was, sorry, can you remind me of your original question? I went off.
Yeah, it was more so just like a statement of like an idea of, possibly getting AI to like recreate a winner in from the US into a different home.
And that would be exactly how I'd approach it is, either getting an AI to adapt the message for that specific market, or potentially best case, I would go find someone, who lives in that market who I can then license the content to and work out some sort of licensing deal with them. And that's going to be the best way to really enter a new market for the vast majority of people.
Awesome. Some standard operating procedures for editing these videos. Do you like to have captions versus no captions? Are there any things that like you found are like every one of our videos has to have X, Y, and Z in it in terms of like production?
Yeah. So for every one of them, we'll do like punches, where you're like punching into the person's face to emphasize certain points and then zooming back out and then punching back in. So we'll do that very consistently, because it helps kind of pull their attention back in as well. And then beyond that, we'll also clip out any sections that are a little bit like rambling, so to speak, or kind of deter from the main message in the ad. And then, always captions. We've tested like background music versus no background music. That doesn't make a difference. You've seen both win in a variety of scenarios. The one thing that I think people forget about, which is great if you're shooting on an iPhone because you don't really have to worry about this, but normalizing the audio volume to, I think it's 100 decibels or something like that. That's a really important one. So, then, you're scrolling through your newsfeed or whatever and the ad starts playing and you can't hear it and you got to go turn up your volume outside of what everything else on your computer is playing or your phone is playing. So that's an important one. And then there's actually this tool that I love using. It's called Veed.io. So it's Veed.io. I'm not affiliated with it. So if you use it, great. If you don't really care. But it works really well for a lot of the teams that I've worked with. And what's great about it is it can automatically create captions for your videos. It's automatically styled captions for your videos. So you have a lot of different variations in there. And otherwise, even if you're outsourcing this, if your editor is working in Premiere, they're going to hate their life. It is so miserable trying to do animated captions in Premiere. But this tool makes it exceptionally easy. And for those aspect ratios that we were talking about earlier, also helps produce in the different aspect ratios for the different channels.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think there's a lot of softwares out there that now do auto captioning, like Descript does it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I love Descript as well.
Yep. And so that's awesome. So always captions. So you don't rely on like Facebook captions. You want to have permanent captions on there, edited captions. Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And so
baked in captions for any video editors that are watching it, apparently is the right term.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things you said was like punch in for really important points, right? So zoom in, right, to like emphasize and whatnot. That's interesting. And also the audio normalization. I never would have thought about that, but I hate having to do that. Meaning like, oh, I can't hear it, or it's not at what you're used to hearing. Like that's super relevant. Now, how about like just sitting at a desk? Like, do you find it doesn't really matter the background or the scene in which you're recording it? Or do you find that makes a big difference? Like if I'm walking around outside trying to record a video versus say a professional studio like this, what do you find performs?
Foremost is always market message match. So finding the message that really resonates. And if that's shot, it could be shot in a dumpster and it would not matter because it's still going to resonate with your audience. But we've found that anytime that we try to get a little too fancy with the production quality, and this is specifically for Meta because the opposite is true on YouTube. Anytime we've tried to get too fancy with the production quality, it's flopped every single time. So we really lean into, shooting that selfie style on your iPhone, making sure that you have 4K set up, and then just making sure that it's a congruent, smooth message. So it's better to shoot the same thing 3 times over in order to get it right, where there's not going to, a lot of post-production is not going to be required from an editing team. And even more so, if you're spending $5K a month on ads, it's probably, DIY editing, so to speak. So it's easier to film it 3 or 4 times, get the right version, and then just select the right version and put that into market after, some quick editing.
Got it. So you wouldn't advise for like those auto caption cuts where like it cuts down like the pauses. So there's like, it's the TikTok style where it's like there's no spacing in between your breaths. You wouldn't recommend that?
Part of the reason why too is that most people on Facebook are not watching with their volume on. I believe the opposite is true on Instagram, but don't quote me on that. So most people that are seeing your video, they're just reading along with the captions that you have baked into the video. So the more compelling you can make that video in terms of attention grabbing outside of the captions, by all means try that. But most people are not even paying attention to your face at that.
Are you monitoring the metrics of like watch rate? Like, hey, I want to get 10% the hook rate, do you have standard metrics that you look for like early indicators of like, hey, we've got some market message match here and, let's keep rolling with this, or let's lean into this a little bit more?
Great question. No, and how we arrived at that conclusion is we actually tested this extensively, and the main thing that we were looking at was video view rates across the board and CTRs. So people that click like see more or some sort of link on Facebook, and we found that none of that correlated with our CPA. So instead of looking at those kind of like leading indicators, which Facebook is already doing automatically, that's why we have to test in a controlled environment, because otherwise Facebook's optimizing for those leading indicators, and you'll end up scaling an ad that is just not going to get results at any point. So we just started testing directly for CPA instead.
Interesting. That's something I've never heard before, meaning you kind of ignore all the front end statistics and just figure out which ones are actually converting. So you really don't look at click-through rate at all. Like I'll just ignore all the video stats, but you don't look at like click-through rate all versus click-through rate linked for leading indicators with your videos. You're only looking at CPA.
I mean, sorry, CPA is the main KPI that we're looking at. In terms of like diagnostic KPIs and things of that nature, we will typically look at CTR, CPC, all that other fun stuff for both link and all. And, for CTR all, I think that's a really great indicator for the stopping power of the ad. So if you have like a 0.3% CTR all, that's a terrible ad. You should turn it off. It's probably not going to perform. 1% is still on the very low end, but the higher you can get CTR all, typically the better the performance.
Got it.
Facebook is going to do the best job that it can to put your ad in front of the right people. And that's going to artificially inflate CTR all, because now you're just in a really great pocket of the audience, as opposed to, it actually being a great cold market ad. So you'll find that you won't be able to scale that ad, essentially.
Yeah. Interesting. Dude, I feel like I just got a free consulting session from you. This has been really, really good. We need to get my clients doing more video ads, just because we rely on image testing. It's just super easy. It's really, it's low hanging fruit to crank out a bunch of images, but I mean, we do run into consistent scaling issues with images. And I think that's partly due to inventory, and also they really want, like, video matters. Everyone's watching video at least on the phone and social. We found some interesting data of like video on a sales page, on the landing page, very low consumption, like very, very, very low consumption.
Yep.
And it's wild. I don't know. Like, so the data's still out for me, but like we're leaning away from having videos on the landing pages and on the sales pages, and really just trying to pre-sell them as much as we possibly can on the ad itself.
Exactly.
So, because we're fighting for attention. If we got their attention on the ad itself, like you have a very, very little window of actually, pushing that conversion all the way through.
And that's a great way to approach it. If you can approach your video ads as though they're like mini VSLs, now Facebook has all of that data as first party data, and it can start optimizing around those watch rates and things like that. Yeah. And basically how the algorithm works is it'll send out your ad to different segments or different like little buckets of audiences, and it'll start scaling the spend towards leading indicators. So if this bucket has a really great CTR and, people are clicking like and all that fun stuff, it's going to allocate more spend. And you can't see that anywhere in Business Manager that's actually what's happening. But the more you can kind of like front load your ads with to benefit Facebook's first party data, the more successful they'll be.
Yeah. The one thing that I wish that Facebook does, and maybe it does do it, but maybe the fact that we really rely heavily on image creative, I wish it would actually optimize for like cost per acquisition. I know there's rules that, there's settings that say that this is what I want to optimize for, but I've never found them to actually be accurate. But I do think that that's more so a fact that we primarily run image ads, and I think they just burn out a lot quicker. Like we won't really find that the CPA will go down or even stabilize. It usually just goes up. Like, well, yeah. So,
and again, like the Land Geek is the only client that we have that we're running static creatives for, and it's from a place of necessity, because again, they're not great at video creators, and we have to cycle through so much. Every single week, we have 10 different video or static creators that we're putting into market, and ultimately that creative your ability to be creative with those static images starts to fatigue over time. And it just becomes almost more of a lift to come up with new, unique ideas for the graphic, as opposed to, just creating a video ad that's going to have more longevity in the market.
Yep. We did have one video ad that did have really, really long longevity for one of our low ticket workshops, but it was a bear to produce. Like and it took a while to like say, okay, this is the winner. Like we got the winner here. And anyway, yeah. So obviously they do work, but that's where your ROI is going to come from, it seems like. So
100%.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's a blessing that the production quality really doesn't matter. It can be, your iPhone selfie style at 4K running the teleprompter app on your phone just while you're walking your dog. It literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely good enough to scale.
Last question, Mike. This has been awesome. Do you ever mess around or do you turn on the auto or whatever Facebook calls it, like the AI enhancement features? Like, they will automatically like enhance your creatives based on whatever they feel is going to get the click? Or do you want to have more control over like, no, don't run any enhancements. I want to have control over that.
Yeah, I think the only one we don't typically have turned on is there's like a new one where it's like site links or something like that. Don't typically turn that one on, but yeah, we let Facebook take full control over that. And if you've done a good job with providing the video creators and the different aspect ratios, typically what Facebook is going to experiment with is that first little thumbnail. And it's going to find the like one section of the video where you're making like a goofy face. Yeah. And it's going to kind of like zoom in on that as the thumbnail that it's going to use, because that's what grabs people's attention.
Yep.
And honestly, it's so much easier that way, because now it's not something additional that you have to think about. Facebook's just automatically going to test every frame of that video for you and eventually make the right decision.
This conversation that we've had has gotten me the most excited about like the next stage of ads, and just like, man, I'm leaving so much potential on the table just personally. And because you've scaled so many campaigns to very, very large numbers, I mean, like the data is very, very clear. You got to have video in your arsenal. And yep. I think it marries up with like, so I'm big on focusing, low budget, like offer validation, like here's how to get very, very quick data. But then when you're ready to kind of get more consistency, video's where it's got to go.
100%. What got you there is not what's going to get you to the next level, or whatever that saying is.
Yep.
First thing that comes to mind.
And I got to test the experiment feature as well. Is that in the campaign settings, or is that in ad set settings?
I think it's actually just in business manager setting. But it's
camera,
like where you're clicking around in business manager.
Yeah.
Top left, little hamburger menu. It's floating around in there somewhere.
Awesome. So we got to wrap up. Mike, this has been fantastic. Where can people go connect with you? Where can they find you out?
Incredible. Best place at the moment is going to be LinkedIn. So it's LinkedIn / Mike J. Heiser is going to be the best place to connect with me.
Awesome. So we'll make sure we include that in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please make sure you connect with Mike. Let him know you heard him on Experts Unleashed, and give him some props. Share some feedback with him. That would be very much appreciated. Mike, been awesome. Thank you so much for your expertise, and we'll see you all on the next episode.